Hey comic fans, Scott Harris King here. I'm back, and as promised today, I'm going to be talking about Night Nurse. I've got my complete run of Night Nurse here that I'm going to show off. I'm going to talk all about this massively underrated series. Over the last 15 years or so, opinion has sort of come around on Night Nurse. Now, when I started buying comics in the mid 80s, Night Nurse was a big punchline. Obviously, it had come out 10 years earlier in 1972. By the 80s, everyone was making fun of Night Nurse. And in retrospect, that sort of mockery is very much a very bro-y sort of thing. Comics by the 80s had turned into this very insular situation where it was basically 90% superhero comics, and then we get a few things like Conan and some sci-fi comics, but it was very sort of everything oriented towards male readers, right, at the direct market. And so all of these boys and men that collected superhero books would make fun of the other stuff, and Night Nurse was a big target. But actually, having read Night Nurse, I think it's one of the best comics of the time period. I love Night Nurse. Now, I love my romance comics, but even more, I love soap operas. Night Nurse is not actually a romance comic, okay? So we're going to dig into all of it right now. First of all, let's just talk about the origin of the series. I talked a little bit about this in my last video, which was about the cat. This came out in 1972, and basically the origin of the series is that Stan Lee had the idea, which was way ahead of its time, to put out a line of comics featuring female protagonists done by female creative teams. So The Cat, for instance, the first issue, written by Linda Fight with art from Marie Severin. And they used female creative teams throughout that. The other two comics that were launched in this same line were Night Nurse and Shaun of the She-Devil. All of them only lasted a few issues. Cat was canceled after issue 4. Night Nurse was canceled after issue 4. Shaun of the She-Devil lasted until issue 5. And I'm not exactly sure why. With the Cat, I really liked the first issue, but every issue got progressively worse. There was a terrible lineup of villains. Honestly, the series wasn't very good, even though the origin story in the first issue was really good, and the character was really cool. It just didn't work. Night Nurse is different. I think with Night Nurse, it slipped in between the cracks because it's not actually a romance comic. So we'll take another look at this here. What it is a soap opera. And it's basically the kind of thing that you would get on a primetime drama. The idea behind Night Nurse is that Night Nurse is not the name of a character. A lot of people think that it's this character here in the middle, which we're going to talk a little bit more about soon, and that she's called Night Nurse. That's not the case. What it is about three characters, these three young women who go through nursing school together. And in the first issue, they graduate from nursing school, and they're all roommates as well. So they live together, they graduate from nursing school, they all get assigned to big city hospital, the biggest hospital in the big city, and they're put on the overnight nursing duty. So they do the ER stuff, they take care of the patients at night in the hospital. That's what they're the night nurses, really plural, right? And so what it is basically like ER or Chicago Hope or Grey's Anatomy, St. Elsewhere. It's one of these classic hospital primetime soap opera dramas where we get all the romantic stuff with the doctors and whatever, but there's all this like human drama because of the different patients that are coming in and out and stuff like that. So I think that it sort of, again, wasn't quite full romance, and romance comics were definitely seriously on the decline by the end of 1972 when this came out. There just wasn't really a place for it, I think, in the market at that time. I don't think Marvel really knew how to advertise it. Cat and Shaun of the She-Devil fit in a lot more with what they were publishing, so it's a little more surprising to me that they didn't make either of those work. But Night Nurse, it just was neither here nor there, right? which is too bad because from what I've read of this series, again, I think the cat goes downhill real fast. Shaun of the She-Devil is okay. It has some great like Steranko covers, which really elevate the book. But for the actual comic, I'm not a big fan of jungle stuff. So for me, it's more jungle crap, right? Night Nurse is really good. It's actually really good. So there's a few interesting things. Now, last time I mentioned that they were trying to do a female creative team with the cat, and Linda Fight was the writer of the series, with assist from Roy Thomas in the first issue. But Linda Fight is the writer for that series, right? And at the time, which I didn't mention last video, in 1972 she got married to Herb Trimpe, right? And then by issue 3 we had Patty Cockrum, was before she was married and taken on the name Patty Cockrum, doing the pencils. So female creative teams with ties to people that are in the bullpen. Of course, even now, but even much more so at the time, it was very much sort of a good old boys club. It's always about who you know, and so the men would get all the assignments. It's great that they were doing this where they were bringing in the female creators, but most of the female creators they had working on the books had some sort of connection to the men that were working at Marvel. That's also the case here with Night Nurse, because Gene Thomas, Roy Thomas's first wife at the time, of course, he's the editor-in-chief of the whole line of comics, and the editor of this book, hires his wife to write it. And actually, I think it was a great idea in this case because it's really good. One thing that they deviate from a little bit, though, is that the art is not by a woman. It's actually by veteran comic creator Win Mortimer, and he does some great art in this. It's so good. Now, Roy Thomas, again, credited here as editor with his wife as the writer, but there's a couple touches that are very Roy Thomas, particularly the first thing in the first issue. So we're going to talk, again, I mentioned we're going to talk a little about the main character here, Lynda Carter. You may remember that back in the early 60s, pre-superhero Marvel, they had a series called Lynda Carter Student Nurse. Now, she had black hair, but, people often dye their hair, so the very first thing that says here is, on the threshold of a new career, on the dawn of a new day, graduation day, Lynda Carter, student nurse, must make the most difficult decision of her life. Now, this is very Roy Thomas to bring back old forgotten Marvel characters and reuse them. In interviews, Roy has said that the reason he did that sort of thing was because he was already aware, even at the time, of copyright stuff and legal issues where it was work for hire, and so anything that they created would be owned by the company. So he has said that he doesn't want to create new stuff. He would prefer to bring back and revitalize old properties because he knew that if he created something new, he wouldn't have any of the rights to it. It could be true. It's also well known that Roy Thomas is a super nerdball, and he really enjoys paying tribute and bringing back the old characters. So I think it's actually a mix of both. In this case, he makes it explicit on the first page that this is Lynda Carter, student nurse, which is in bold lettering to make sure you don't miss it. So this is, in fact, the same Lynda Carter that was in that earlier series 10 years earlier. So if you're looking for first appearances, this is not the first appearance of Lynda Carter here on the cover, who's blonde in this series. Her first appearance was in the very hard to find Lynda Carter Student Nurse #1 from 10 years earlier, from 61. There's two other characters in the series, though, as well. Those are her two roommates and co-workers and co-students who come through everything together and get assigned to the hospital, same hospital, and the same thing. Georgia Jenkins, who is a black character, and Christine Palmer. Now, if the name Christine Palmer rings any bells, it's because the character later was revived in Marvel, became a love interest for Nightcrawler, of all people, and then eventually made an appearance in the movies as Doctor Strange's love interest in the first Doctor Strange movie in the MCU. So this is her first appearance. It's also the first appearance, like I said, of Georgia Jenkins, who I'm not sure has appeared anywhere after this. Let me show you here issue 2. So we get a lot of drama here. Again, it's just like an episode of ER or something. People are, someone in the second issue, someone gets hit by a car, and it turns out the girl that got hit by the car is the police commissioner's daughter, and then it's like, oh, it was a gangland hit, or what was happening, etc., etc. Super drama. I do wonder, like I said, how much Roy Thomas is actually involved in the writing of these, because I think you can see his clear hand in that first note in the first issue, and these can be very wordy. Here's issue 3 of Night Nurse. Now, my copy of issue 1 is super trashed. Top staples detached. It basically got water damage in the top left corner of the book. Staple detached. So the spine is split actually about halfway down the book. There's water stains on that corner, both front and back cover, and through the whole book. Some other damage as well. On the plus side, I paid less than $1 for it. Way back in the day, in the late aughts, like 2009 or so, I bought a lot of basically water damaged romance comics. Paid about $20 including shipping for it, and there were about 23 books in it. Most of them I got rid of because they were water damaged and crusty and musty, and they were kind of wrecked. But the Night Nurse #1 I kept. My copies of 2, 3, and 4 are in a lot better shape. The one thing I want to mention, I'll show you a couple things about this. Has some spine rub. But it's got a date stamp here, which unfortunately is partially obscured. It's something 1970 something, but we can figure this out because the cover date is March of 73, and so this is either, I think it's December 20th of 1972 is actually the date on here, which coincidentally I'm recording this on December 20th of 2024. So 52 years ago today, this book would have been arriving on the stands. You can also see, for whatever reason, even though it's got a date stamp, it also has the grease pencil thing. So this was like on the top of a bundle of these that were being dropped off somewhere. Okay, and so we can see here that Linda Carter is trying to protect this guy, the patient, and there's someone that's coming in here, and he's saying, out of the way, there's a contract out on that guy. And she says, no, this man is my patient. To kill him, you have to shoot me first. And he says, have it your own way, sister. Murder stalks Ward 8. Now, of particular interest is that a large part of this plot, or a small plot part of it, I guess, it's clearly inspired by Godfather Part 1, specifically the sequence where after Don Corleone is shot, he's brought to the hospital. Michael shows up to pay his respects and see how his father's doing, discovers that there's nobody there. The guys they had sent there to guard him are gone. They've been cleared out. But the police that are supposed to be there are also missing. Nobody's around except for one nurse. And he realizes there's a hit out. And he moves his father to this other room, and they protect him. There's a sequence almost exactly like that in here where she realizes that someone's coming to kill the patient, and she moves him to a different room and stuff like that. So there's very clear, of course, again, with a cover date, an arrival date of December 20, 1972. Godfather's just come out earlier in 1972, so it's a clear sort of influence here in issue 3. Now, I'm going to show you the last issue, a couple things. Both my copies of 2 and 4 have this stamp on them here, and I'm hoping some of you in the comments can tell me what that stamp is. I've seen this stamp before, and somewhere in the distant recesses of my memory, one time I knew what that was, but I just can't remember. These are mid-grade copies that I have for 2, 3, and 4. What's really great about this, a few things here, is that We can see kind of a really interesting. I don't want to say change of direction for the book because I don't think it was a permanent change of direction, but them playing with the types of stories that they can tell in the Night Nurse sort of universe. This is Christine Palmer, who is the third of the characters. You can easily tell them apart because Linda's blonde, uh, Georgia is black, and she's a redhead. So they've color coded the characters to make them easy to tell apart since they're all wearing identical nursing uniforms, right? In issue 2, Christina Palmer leaves and something happens. She I forget exactly, but I think she was having a relationship with one of the doctors or something, and it's a scandal, and so she leaves out of embarrassment or whatever. Here in issue 4, she shows up again, and we're not in the city. We're not at the city hospital. We're following her now to see what's happening with her. She's taken on a job at this old mansion to take care of this person there, and it basically is actually like a gothic horror, gothic romance story where you have the haunted house, all the creepy stuff in there, and of course that was really big at the time. This is right around the same time where DC had been experimenting with their own gothic horror titles, and so you can see that in Night Nurse they're responding to the same thing. One thing that's interesting is that Jean Thomas is still listed as a writer, but here she's a co-writer with Linda Fight. So the two of them have teamed up to write this issue. I love it. I love the fact that we're going out of the hospital. We're already in 4 issues stretching the definition of what Night Nurse is, who the main characters are. Because through the first 3 issues, the main character has been Linda through most of it, and the other characters are just getting subplots, really. But here we're clearly showing that any of the 3 can be the main characters. Potentially, if we bring in other nurses, they could become characters. And we're getting outside the hospital to tell different types of stories. So I love it. I just can't say enough how much I love this series. These issues here I got around 2010. After I had the first issue, I decided to finish the run. And you can see this one, it says good, very good with a price of $15. It's a nicer shape than that. And actually, like I said, it has the spine rub, but it's more of towards a mid-grade. All 3 of these are. Here's issue 2 again, which is probably the nicest of these 3. Again, it's still mid-grade. And again, there's the stamp, which is on. So 2 and 4 were both clearly from kind of the same source or the same collection. I love this series as a fan of soap operas and romance and stuff like that. This is like the top notch for me. I actually prefer it to pure romance because soap operas is like where that interest for me came from. So I like it when, in addition to the romantic stuff, I like it kind of where the romance is the subplot and there's other plots involving the characters. So really cool, great series. One of my all-time favorites. So now I'm curious what you guys think. If you can leave your comments down below, let me know what you think of Night Nurse. I'll see you next time.